Oh, I just got this popped up here. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, I'm with Coal Creek Canyon Firefighter Department. I also work in tech. And then what else did we have to go over? I'm sorry.
Pronouns and then a visual description.
Yeah, I went over pronouns. She, her, and then I'm wearing a navy blue tank top, brown hair, and white AirPods. I'll pass it over to Robbin.
Thank you, Amber. Hi, everyone. My name is Robbin Meneses. I'm a Latin cis man in my late 20s with fair skin with medium black wavy hair. My preferred pronouns are L, he, him, and his. With that being said, I'll pass it over to Crystal.
Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Egli. My pronouns are she, her. I am the CEO of Inclusive Guide, and I'm 38, mixed race, black and white woman. I've got curly brown hair, comes just past my shoulders, and I'm wearing a rainbow colored dress. I will pass it to Andrea.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea, but you can call me Andy. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm currently a development manager with the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. I am a woman in her mid-20s. I have dark hair that is pulled back. I'm wearing glasses, and I have some moon earrings. And I will pass it back to Chris.
Thanks. So if you want to introduce yourself, feel free to do so in the chat. Let us know where you're calling in from and anything else you want us to know. And before we get started, I'd like to go through some community agreements. I'll try and share my screen again. As you can probably see, I don't usually do all the things at once. Very much a one thing at a time person. So I want to set up some community agreements for participation today. First and foremost, I want to emphasize that while our panelists volunteered to be here, it's up to them what questions they want to answer and how much they want to share. So we're not here to trigger any traumas or relive anything, regardless of how educational it might be. So I would ask that everyone respect that. To participate, feel free to use the chat function, to use the react functions, but please stay on mute until we indicate that you can come off mute to ask questions. If you do have questions while we're talking, feel free to drop them in the chat. If you readily identify as someone from a marginalized community, please put an asterisk in front of your question to indicate that, and we'll prioritize your question. If you're not from a marginalized community, please respect that we are prioritizing marginalized Coloradans in our question and answer portion and don't include that asterisk. So, community agreements. Number one, we're going to create a brave space today as much as we can, which we define as a space where there is psychological safety, radical acceptance, and active listening. So where folks feel comfortable learning, sharing, and growing together. So hopefully we can make that space for each other. Number two, we'll offer, ask for, and respect pronouns and chosen names. So when we mess up, which happens, we will apologize, correct, and repair harm rather than compound harm by making excuses. So, if someone misgenders me, that's fine. You can just say, I'm sorry, they, and then continue on with the conversation, and that's fine. Number three, we will leave the stories and carry the lessons from our time together here. So personal stories are shared in confidence and should remain in confidence unless you are given permission to share the stories. Everyone should strive to embody the lessons gleaned from what is learned through sharing. Number four, we will attend to the impacts of our actions rather than voice or center our intentions. So you may perceive your intent as harmless. However, the impact of your words or actions may be hurtful, damaging, or triggering. So be open to hearing that and repairing the impact of your words or actions. Number five, we'll grow our edges but honor each other's boundaries. So the further we're removed from our normal or safe space, the more discomfort we can feel. It's important to recognize when you're reaching an edge, and for the sake of others, it's important to grow those edges as you can. So we ask that people try to sit in their discomfort and get curious about what their discomfort is trying to tell them. do you need support understanding a topic? Is there a question that you could ask that could help that understanding, or are you defending your power or privilege? So discomfort can lead to growth, but we also want to honor each other's boundaries. So I think everyone knows, like, when they're up against a wall and they have a boundary, and it's a no cross line. So let's honor that as well. And if you need to take some time, like maybe disconnect, turn off your volume or whatever, do what you need to for honoring your boundaries. Number 6, we'll recognize the burden people with marginalized identities endure. So unbridled curiosity and inquiries can be othering to people who live at the intersection of one or more marginalized identities, who in addition to processing oppressive dynamics, also often take on that teacher role. So we recognize that people from marginalized communities have the right not to answer any questions regarding their identities if they don't wish to. So with that, I want to see if anyone has anything to add to our community agreements before we get started. Feel free to come off mute or drop it in the chat if that's more your style. Okay, I'm not seeing anything, but if something does come up, you can always drop it in the chat later too as well. So now that we have our agreements laid out, we'll jump into our main questions for our panelists. And our first question is, do you feel invited, welcome, and safe recreating in our public lands, in the environmental or outdoor sector, or participating in community science without critical mass, and why or why not? So we're going to do this popcorn style. Whenever you're ready, go ahead and pop.
I can kick us off. It's kind of a mixed answer because I think, so, and I didn't mention this before, I lived for the most of my life in Chicago and then moved to Colorado about 4 years ago now. And I think coming into open spaces and certain areas, I kind of was around the Boulder area first. It was always kind of difficult to, in my brain, difficult to see that or to understand if I was outdoorsy enough or athletic enough when I first moved here, or first moved to Colorado anyway. And so when I joined the fire department this year as a volunteer, I remember coming into the EMR class again in the beginning of the year and kind of like, obviously seeing that I was the only person of color, I think two things, like everyone was really nice and everyone greeted me and everyone was, first day of school kind of thing, which was great. But I also still had in the back of my head, like, am I smart enough for this, or am I outdoorsy enough for this? So I think that's always in the back of my head. And I didn't mention this, I am in my late 30s. And I've always had that kind of feeling. But I think specifically with the fire department, I think everyone has been doing a great job. I'm really new at it and new to the department. But I wrote down a couple of examples, and I'll give one example. Is just being able to ask as many questions as possible and never feeling like, I mean, there might have been one instance, but for the most part, like especially in the EMR class, no one ever made me feel stupid. They're just like, answer the question and here's some more support and here's some more resources. Like, for example, gym and training. I mean, there's a lot of extensive training that goes with the fire department. And, I feel like I know as much as I know and in terms of working out, but that's not my big strength. And I remember going up to somebody and just being like, so what workouts should we be doing? Should we like carry stuff around? What are we doing? And she just like paused and kind of gave me a grin, which I'm like, oh, was that a stupid question for someone that just kind of moved into the mountains? But so that initial feeling, I did feel kind of like, oh shit, that was a dumb question. And her reaction, I want to be honest, was a little like taken back and kind of like grinning a little bit. But I remember the next training I saw her, she's like, hey, I left my extra laptop with workouts at the gym so you can kind of go through it. And so I think that was like that moment of like, oh shit, she thought about me and she thought about providing a resource, and excuse my language, and providing, sorry about that, and providing some resource for me that just made me feel more welcome and more accepted. And I have a bunch of other stories, but I want to keep talking. But yeah, any questions on that, or like pass it along to somebody else that wants to include their thoughts.
Thank you, Amber. A lot of what you said really resonated with me. So my name is Robbin again, pronouns he, him, his. So I actually came from Miami. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, where it's minority majority. And so for a lot of portion of my life experiencing the outdoors, it was just not, it wasn't something that I thought about. I put on a lot of events, community science events to really empower BIPOC and low-income communities. I held a lot of events for individuals of color, essentially, in Miami to participate in water activities, and created really inclusive practices, and at the same time limited the barrier of cost to them. It wasn't until I started actually camping later on in my life, and camping in Florida, the only place that you can really go to is Central Florida. And so acknowledging my privilege as a cis male man, at the end of the day, I was allotted a little bit of flexibility, but the moment I entered into those backcountry spaces where it was primarily white, and I truly became that minority, that's where I felt most unsafe. And really, I would actually plan out my gas and plan out any meals, any stops, and just minimize it as much as I could, because it was honestly an area that I never felt welcomed or never felt safe. So I would just get to my camping spot, explore that area, do the hiking, and then I would head on back. And again, I would plan out those stops really accordingly, just to make sure that I stayed safe. And so those were really the only instances, at least in Florida, where I didn't necessarily feel welcomed. Coming here to Colorado is actually a little bit different at the same time, because I am now truly as well as part of the minority. And again, acknowledging my privilege as a cis male. I think what's also really important is that I have had the opportunity to go out hiking, camping by myself, and I've felt pretty safe. Where I haven't necessarily felt so welcome has actually been in more exclusive spaces. So winter sports or mountain bike, those spaces have tended to be a little bit more exclusive and more predominantly white. And so for me, it's been a little bit harder of adjustment going into the spaces. More importantly, because of my previous role professionally, I was a fundraiser. And so as a fundraiser, you always go into these spaces that you feel awkward. You're just completely out of your comfort zone. You're also in a room of high-end wealth individuals. And so when I was younger, I tended to assimilate. And so a big priority for me at this point in life is I'm entering these spaces where I feel awkward, where I feel excluded, where I may not necessarily have that sense of community. But for me, it's so important not to go back into those old habits of assimilating just to be able to fit into the environment. And so it's also standing my discomfort and acknowledging that I can do that, again, because I'm a cis male, and that may not necessarily be the case for everyone. One of the other things that has really allowed me to really come out and be more safe in these environments is joining organizations that I'm a part of. So like Latino Outdoors have really allotted me a lot more comfort in finding that community and things like that.
I would love to go after Robbin because my upbringing was exactly the opposite. I grew up in, this is Crystal Egli, she, her. I grew up in rural Vermont, the opposite of Miami, literally, geographically, and demographically. And I grew up really outdoorsy, and I just thought I didn't see other people of color in the outdoors because they just weren't around me. In Vermont, I was like, they must be doing this in other places. Absolutely, in large numbers. This is for everyone. And it wasn't until I left Vermont that I realized that that wasn't necessarily the case in all of these places. But I still never really felt unsafe to the point where I didn't go do something I wanted to do, because I think I grew up with that, base level confidence of knowing how to set up a tent and how to find a campsite and how to pay for it at a box, and how to interact with park rangers and things like that. So I think that baseline was there. So then all of the other things on top were challenges weren't necessarily it didn't seem insurmountable by the time I was in the outdoors in unknown land to me. But then I started hunting a few years ago, and you enter a firearm into the mix with what I look like. And that's when I really started feeling the pressure of safety to the point where I was questioning where I was going. And like Robbin was saying, like really mapping out places and calling ahead. I worked for Colorado Parks and Wildlife at the time, so I would call officers in the area and say like, hey, I'm heading out here. And I would like literally call law enforcement in advance to let them know. And that is an enormous privilege I have from having been in that network of folks. So yeah, and then I ended up making a business out of what Robbin just said, and create an inclusive guide so people could do exactly that, map out some safe spaces. And so now it's literally my life work to do that, not necessarily just for myself and for hunting, but for anybody, because it took so long to realize that I wasn't the only one. And now that I'm in organizations, Robbin, I'm just echoing everything you said in tandem here. Like Hunters of Color and Artemis Sportswomen, things like that. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so prevalent. I thought I was just the only one out here, like, but it is it's very common. So
Yeah, and I guess I'll jump in last. Hi everyone, it's Andy. And yeah, I think I can answer this question in 3 different parts. So a little bit of my background. I'm originally from Mexico. I lived there for about 6 years. So I am an immigrant. And then I moved to Michigan. So I lived in the suburbs of Detroit for a really, really long time. And it was a very, very white area. So I always kind of grew up in that crowd. So I think the first question, do you feel invited? I don't think the outdoors invited me. I just kind of showed up without invitation and just barged in the door. So, and I really wish that someone had made that invitation to me, because I didn't grow up going camping with my family. My mom and dad didn't take me camping or hiking. It just wasn't a thing, back where I'm from and in my community, just in general. And yeah, I think working in the immigrant rights movement for about 1.5 years now, I do notice that a lot of our immigrant community don't personally feel invited in the outdoors, and that can be for a variety of different reasons. But I do think that's something that the state of Colorado, should really kind of work towards. But yeah, I do generally feel welcome. Everyone who I've met working in the outdoors, mostly white, is very welcoming for the most part. But in terms of feeling safe, I don't really tend to hike alone. I don't really tend to camp alone, especially as a woman. That's just not something that I do or would want to start doing anytime soon. And that's, I think, a little unfortunate. I do have a big plan of one day hiking the PCT, which is the Pacific Crest Trail. And whenever I mention that plan to, some friends, or the first thing that they ask is oh, is that safe to do as a woman? And I'm like, is it? I guess I didn't think about that. So there's just a lot of, a lot of progress that we have to do.
So for me, I don't feel safe recreating by myself or without a cadre of people to protect me, which tends to mean that I don't recreate outdoors. So my feelings of safety in the outdoors are kind of derived from my unsafe experiences indoors and in crowded public spaces. So I've not had a problem racially. Like when the pandemic first started, I was spat on. And I thought at first maybe it was because I'm part Asian, but then I remembered I was wearing a fuck Trump mask. So I think it had to do with that. But my feelings of unsafeness have to do with being trans and being visibly trans. So I've been attacked, ridiculed, and met with hostility and policed for existing in spaces while trans, especially bathrooms have been a huge issue. Like I've been pulled out of bathrooms by cops and that's terrifying. And then I've had a lot of women kind of police me existing in bathrooms. So I kind of repeating what Robbin and Crystal said, I would plan my bathroom stops as best as I could, like anywhere that I had to go, and try to like get in and get out before I had to use a bathroom if possible. And so those experiences in the indoors and public spaces led to the idea that I would be more in danger in the outdoors, because whoever you came across is who you had to deal with. And what if I came across a transphobe, you know? And there would be no one to stop an attacker if someone reacted violently. And then there's that saying, in the woods, no one can hear you scream. So all these things float around in my head, and it makes me just not want to go out in the outdoors at all. When I do go by myself or with another person, I don't enjoy myself at all. I can't get out of my head. I can't enjoy the nature that I'm in. I can't relax. I have this like heightened state of anxiety, and I do that hypervigilance thing where I'm just constantly on the lookout for possible attacks. So the only way that I feel safer is if I'm with a huge group of people, or there's enough people in screaming distance. So I'll do like short hikes kind of nearby towns. So like in Wheat Ridge, they have that hike kind of by the wildlife preserve. I feel safe there because there's people who can hear you scream. So that's kind of where I am on that. So for question number 2, for those who do feel safe, how did you get to that feeling of safety, and what things did you do to feel safer?
I already kind of answered a little bit up front, but I want to bridge the first and second question with some things that Andrea said. Andy, right? Sorry. This is Crystal Egli. Sorry. I also need to remember to do that. Andy, yeah. So was talking about potentially hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, and people say, do you feel like, is it safe for a woman, right? And I've heard that so many times when I go out and I tell someone I'm going to go camping by myself, they're like, do you feel safe as a woman? But like, we never ask men, like, what are you going to do in the outdoors to make women feel safe around you? And I just wanted to flip that script a little bit to just demonstrate Andy's point is like, there's all of this hypervigilance that, like, especially you just described, Chris, in like really, really great detail. And people ask us all the time, but no one asks other people what they're doing to make us feel safe or to ensure our safety or anything like that. And yeah, I just wanted to bridge that since I already answered a little bit.
Okay, this is Amber Mohammad Castańeda. I kind of feel the same, that I already kind of spoke to a little bit of that, but I feel like I don't like that sort of, the idea of feeling safe is never like constant, because I always feel like, and I'm kind of speaking a lot about the fire department because it's so new to me. Because I always feel like there's going to be a new interaction with someone new in the department, and I'm going to like have to analyze that interaction. And and to a certain extent, am I acting or reacting appropriately? Like if I do ask a question, someone makes me feel silly or replies with a sarcastic comment, I always have this second like guessing or like analyzing afterwards, like, wait, was he just being sarcastic with me personally because I'm a female, or because I'm Pakistani, or because I'm Mexican, or because I'm from Chicago, or because I have this accent? Or so it's constant circling. And you know, I don't know. And I think what makes me feel safe is that those second moments with that person, or second moments with that group, that kind of reassures, like, oh, you know, that was maybe potentially just a joke, or that second interaction. I remember my captain like pulled me aside, and I actually thought I was in trouble, or actually, I don't know, I thought I did something wrong, but he acknowledged something that he's like, oh, he's just like, oh, you remember you asked about this particular thing, you know, I'm sorry, I didn't give you a direct answer, or I forgot what was the exact, I'm not sure, but he basically he took me aside and he acknowledged the fact that he potentially gave me wrong information. And I thought that sort of second interaction was just great in and of itself. I didn't personally remember that first interaction or what was, so, but the fact that he's my captain and he went out of the way made me feel safe and made me feel like he was looking out for me, and he was not out to make me feel stupid or make me look stupid, especially that he took me aside like that. I thought that was that absolutely made me feel great. So I feel like it kind of teeters back and forth, if that makes any sense.
Hi, this is Robin again. So I think for me, it's just finding community, and however way I define it, whether it's a close group of friends or it's with an organization like Latino Outdoors or Crux in Color, that, you know, for lack of better words, we have a group, and we may not outnumber everyone else in that space that's more stereotypical of that space, but just having 4 or 5 people that you really connect with, that you identify as part of your community, there is a sense of power, and then there is a sense of comfort, at least, that is present for me. And so even if I may not be feeling welcomed or not safe, and the group might be feeling the same way, I think I've experienced it where we're just working off of each other, and really sometimes we're just being hyper vigilant for each other whenever we're going up and doing that activity. And so it's a secondary level of trust that I don't always have to be eyes in the back of my head trying to figure out something as I'm doing the activity, because I have a group of people, a group of community that is doing the same thing for me, and I'm doing the same thing for them when they're going up.
Yeah, I definitely want to, hi, this is Andy. I definitely want to echo a lot of what Robin said about, you know, creating that community. I feel like I've made a lot of, you know, community, like, you know, how Robin defines it. I mean, that can be like friends or, you know, coworkers, people who you really feel safe with to explore those kinds of realms. And I think that next step for me is feeling safe as an individual in the outdoors. And I think that just kind of involves telling yourself that you belong there, and, you know, trusting your instincts, and trusting that, you know, just that you have the skills necessary to be in those kinds of spaces.
So the third question is, for those who don't feel safe, what do you think you need to feel safe? How do you get out now? And any groups or resources that you use? And it sounds like I might be the only one in this category. Oh, Crystal.
I can speak to when I don't feel safe. Something that makes me feel better is, whoever you are, if you're with me, just believe me when I say I'm feeling something. The thing that actually makes me feel worse is if I'm with someone, let's say a white friend or something, and I'm like, oh, this is scary, like I'm starting to sense some stuff, and they're like, oh, don't worry about it, it's probably this and this. Like, one of us here has a little bit more experience with sussing these things out. It's me. And so, yeah, the biggest thing I just need is anybody I'm with just saying, like, I hear you. Even worst case scenario, I don't quite get it, but I'm gonna I'm going to be vigilant with you. And honestly, a lot of times that calms me right back down. Yeah, just like having somebody with me who will say like, either I see it, or I believe it, or I hear it, or I know it, is night and day difference.
Can I add a little bit to that, Crystal? I think this is Amber, by the way, and I think that's a great statement. I have a firefighter buddy, and she's on, I think, and she's been with me since the beginning, and we kind of done EMR training together, wildland firefighter training together, and like I feel like I can tell her anything when I potentially have those interactions that I kind of spoke to, and she's totally open to it. She listens to it. She doesn't like try to give me advice or try to say it was this or the other. She just listens to me. And I feel like, and I can always like run to her when I have like a quote unquote silly question, or run to her when I need something. And I think that's that support system is super valuable in feeling safe, and then that sort of continuation, that sustainability of, or that, yeah, or sustaining feeling safe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, so was it? I had to think of timelines. It was last year. Like the whole pandemic just feels like one really long year to me. But so last year, Megan, my coworker, took me out to Loveland Pass to do a FICA survey, which I had wanted to do since I started at Rocky Mountain Wild 7 years ago, but because I don't feel safe in the outdoors, I just never went. And she took me out, and the whole thing was, as Crystal said, like checking in, like, you know, listening to me, even if it didn't make sense, like why I was feeling uncomfortable. She acknowledged it. She asked, like, can we try this? And would this help you feel more safe or more steady? So it was like this constant, like checking in and believing. And I remember on the way back, so we came down the mountain, and there's that little town, and I really had to go to the bathroom, but I was like really scared because this is a little tiny mountain town. So I was really scared, and she's like, well, if this doesn't work out, we'll just keep going until we find one. But we went inside, and there was actually like a family restroom, which is like the holy grail for me, like, because then I don't have to walk into one or other gendered rooms. And so it was perfect. But she made it very clear, like, this is about my comfort. This, like, my comfort came first before the FICA survey. Like, if we went up to the spot and I didn't feel safe, we were just going to get back in the car and drive back down. It didn't matter that she had picked me up and drove me out there in the first place. Like, there was no, like, I'm wasting people's time, I'm being too anxious, I'm being this and that, which is what I get sometimes from folks when I try to go out with them. So I think for someone like me, who is as afraid as I am and as anxious as I am, that's what I need, is for someone to be like, there's no such thing as wasting our time. We're going to try it. If it doesn't work out, that's fine. We're going to, like, find you a bathroom that works rather than just feel unsafe in the one that we end up in, you know, that sort of thing. Also, all the groups, like, I can't tell you, like, how much, like, reassurance from being in community with people who feel the same way that I do. Like, Next 100 Colorado really changed my thinking from there's something wrong with me to the spaces aren't meant for me to feel safe in because of how other folks react. So it like took the onus off me, like, I'm the anxious one, I'm the whatever, into, like, our society isn't built for someone like me to exist safely and comfortably anyway. So, like, realizing that was a huge step for me. And I think that's the only reason why I was able to go out with my coworker, was like realizing that the problem wasn't me, realizing that there is a path for me to be okay outside. So yeah, I'd say all the groups, and fingers crossed, I'm hoping to set up an affinity outing for our community science projects next year. So I'm currently in the Justice Outside Rising Leadership Fellowship Rising Leader Fellowship, trying to figure out how to do that in like a trauma-informed way. So fingers crossed that happens next summer, but if not, definitely look for it in the future. It's like, I feel like everyone should have the experience that I did with Megan and be able to go out and do community science if you want to. See those cute little pipers, hear them chirp at you and scurry around. Everyone should have that chance. Are we ready for question 4? Okay. So question 4 is, what other things do you want privileged people to know about how to navigate those spaces?
Everyone, this is Robbin. So I think the first thing that for me that comes to mind, especially now living here, is the cost, the exclusivity and pricing that unfortunately, a lot of these outdoor recreational activities really take on. You're not just burdened by the cost of transportation, but you're also burdened by by the activity itself, whether you're trying to get a backpack or you're trying to go ahead and get the right gear, especially during wintertime. Someone that came from Miami, Florida, where, for me, anything below 70 is freezing cold, to coming over here and buying new winter gear, that was something, it's still something that's very costly for me. So I'm trying to break it up. And I'm also, at the same time, as much as I enjoy the outdoors, I'm forced to limit my interaction, especially during the wintertime, while also raising, unfortunately, my chances of seasonal depression, because I'm unable to really experience the outdoors the way that I want to experience it because of the affordability to it. And so, when we're talking with people that have this privilege, that have this wealth, whether it's generational or they've been able to just build it on their own, it's understanding that, it's not necessarily that I don't want to go out, but it's understanding that it is a huge burden. And I think also, especially during the winter season, I saw this so much where a lot of privileged individuals were kind of just flaunting everything and saying like, oh yeah, we're going to go over here, we're going to go over here. And, they have the right vehicles, they have the right equipment to get out. And, you might have one or the other, but the chances are you don't have both, at least with the communities that I was part of. The other example that I also wanted to give was a few years ago when I was in Yosemite. For those of you that don't know, it's Northern California / Southern Oregon, that they kind of refer to it unofficially as the state of Jefferson. And that place essentially wants to become its own state, and it's primarily extremely conservative. And so being in Yosemite, I unfortunately wasn't able to go ahead and actually get a camping reservation. So I did it through a third-party site and got a camping ground right outside, essentially, Yosemite. But what I didn't know is that it was right outside, it was right in the middle of the state of Jefferson. And so whenever I would go out and get provisions, I was absolutely scared and terrified. Open carry is not a thing. It's illegal in California, but there's other ways of people being intimidating towards you. And I found dogs to be, I absolutely love dogs, but I had never been scared of dogs until that moment. German Shepherds just growling and being also hypervigilant of me with their owners really created a tumultuous experience for me. But what I actually found comfort in is there was one provision shop that I actually ended up just going to for the rest of the trip, because it was this white woman that every time I came in, she would just smile at me and she would strike up a conversation. And just that sense of friendliness and that genuine human connection was enough for me, at least, to feel a little bit more easy in that environment. And so, in terms of advice, sometimes a smile goes a long way. Sometimes just striking up a friendly conversation can really help someone feel at ease. And whether it's because it's a super unsafe area for them, or it's out of their comfort zone, have the opportunity to strike up conversation. As awkward or as introvert you may be, it can really help a person go a long way. Because for me, it made the trip more bearable, and it allowed me to not necessarily sleep safer more calmer at night, but knowing that at least not everyone there that I was interacting with was super conservative and, we're anti-immigration and all that stuff. So just, at the end of the day, just be mindful of your own privilege, your own wealth, and at the same time, put a smile on and just strike a conversation, be that friendly person.
Yeah, I think what Robbin said really speaks to me. I definitely agree with like the money aspect, but I would also like to say that time is an immense privilege that a lot of us don't have, and I think especially immigrant communities, especially those that are undocumented, have to work really, really long hours, and so they don't have the time to put in the research for where to go camping, the research for what gear to get, or the money in that matter. And so just knowing that if you do have the time to engage in outdoor activities, that is an immense privilege. I know immigrant communities that have never even seen or been to the mountains, and that to me is just really sad, because everyone should have the right, to engage in the land that they live in. But yeah, I would say time.
I'll speak to something along the lines of racial privilege. So a lot of times white folks try to make me feel comfortable in the outdoors by giving me a compliment that's actually a microaggression. And I also used to be at fault for that too, for people with other identities, 100%, point three fingers back at myself. But one of the things that I started doing, if I wanted to extend an offering of, hey, I'm safe, like I'm cool, is asking a question. So like, hey, where'd you get that tent? Or something like that, that assumes some expertise or knowledge or something like that, to make the other person know that I respect that they're outdoors, and that they are doing it right. Anybody who's outdoors is doing it right outdoors. But yeah, so I would recommend folks, if you really want to like make a connection or invite someone to a conversation, instead of saying that you like my hair or that I have the most beautiful skin, I would invite you to ask me like, where did I pick up my backpack? Because it is a really cool backpack. So
Those are all great points. I don't know what else to add, but just on that sort of conversation part, like that smile or just saying hi goes so long, and not right away asking that question, where are you from? And then like playing this weird guessing game, and you're like, I know I find myself always answering sarcastically, and then retroactively feeling bad for acting sarcastically. So, try to keep that. I would say try to keep that conversation, as I like trying to think through my thoughts here. Keep that conversation. I mean, as much as it is, and I feel proud of talking about, going to Mexico and kind of being in my mom's town in the mountains, and I do like that conversation. I think it takes a little bit for me to get to that conversation. I think there's a lot more conversation that can be had before that, especially when you're talking to someone new, and that conversation might not happen, depending on what the person's asking. But I think, having that simple, I don't know where I'm getting at, but like the simple conversation first, just like you mentioned, Crystal, like, where'd you get that backpack? Or yeah, I'm trying to think of another example. Yeah, I kind of drawing the blank at this point, but I think a conversation goes a long way. Asking and being open to giving resources, and being just kind of not making the person feel unwelcome. And I know that could be seen in so many different ways. But that look up and down sometimes gets to me, and I feel like I've gotten that here and there on hikes. But for the most part, I'm, like I said, I'm in Coal Creek Canyon. I do get a lot of nice waves and good mornings. I think that comes naturally with living in Colorado, but I have been to areas where I'm getting that look up and down or a look away, and you're just like, okay, we're just gonna keep going through through the motions. But okay, yeah. If I think of anything else, I know I had a point that I was gonna say, but I'll put it in the chat.
So this is Chris again. I keep forgetting to say that. But so I think the thing that I want folks to know is that it's kind of okay. So I've gone out with a lot of different folks, and people don't tend to gender folks on the trail, but they like instantaneously gender me, and I don't understand why. There's always like, oh, let this lady through, or oh, ma'am, are you having a nice day? It's like, you don't say that to anyone else. Why are you singling me out? So it feels like a barb. I don't know if it's like them trying to properly, like, maybe, I don't know. I don't know if they're like going overboard and they think I'm a trans woman and they're trying to like properly gender me, but it would be nice for me personally if people didn't assume and just like spoke to me like they speak to everyone else. So that's number one. And then the number two is the looking up and down. Like, I can't tell you how many people will like look at my face. I know it's stunning. And then look at my chest and be like confused, or look back at the face and back at the chest and back at the face. And it's like, yeah, it's fine. Like, every person has a body and everybody's body is beautiful, and you don't have to make a huge deal about mine if it makes you feel a certain way. So I think what I want folks to know, like I actually learned this in my DEI certificate course, because I didn't know this part. When you come face to face with something you weren't expecting in a certain space, your reaction is a fear response. It's natural. So you might get that hormone flood, the fight or flight, the whatever happens, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. You know, so it's a natural response to coming across something you weren't expecting to see. And I understand that my appearance can do that for people. So while it is natural, it is your responsibility to deal with it. So one of the biggest things is when you have that flood of hormones of like surprise, I wasn't expecting to see someone who's trans on my trail, you can shake it out. And when you shake it out, those hormones actually get dissipated. And so that fight and flight, freeze or fawn disappears. And so like, that's something I really want folks to know, is that yes, it's a natural response, but it's also your responsibility to react differently to it, to shake that out, to make yourself not feel, what's the word I'm looking for, to not be surprised at seeing someone that doesn't reflect your exact demographic, because we all belong, or we all, you know, belong outdoors. We have the right to be outdoors. And the only reason why some of us don't feel that is because we're policed there. So part of that is the not expecting to see us. So expect to see us, I guess is what I'm saying. Crystal, you had something?
Yeah, and as a preventative measure, so that when I go hiking, I don't see a bunch of white people going like this at me. You could also, I'm just kidding, that would be awesome. I recommend people make like screensavers on their computers with pictures of like all different sorts of people in all different sorts of environments. So if you're always hiking, or if you're always in a mall, I don't know, I'm trying to think of diversity of activity. Although this is about the outdoors, so probably all pretty outdoorsy. Just making screensavers of people that have different bodies, different lifestyles, people in different types of groups, and in the outdoors, and just making sure that every time you come back to your desk or something, you've got a new image right there for you. So I recommend that a lot. But also definitely shake your head vigorously every time you see me on a trail.
So our next question is, what other advice do you want marginalized people to know about how you navigate those spaces and how they can too?
That's a great question. This is Amber, by the way. I think that's I'm trying to like go back and forth because I feel like there's so many things I have to say, but I think going back to saying that we're bringing it is something I always tell myself, like, I'm bringing it. Yeah, I'm the only one, but I'm bringing it. And what I try to also do is that self-doubt that I get, or that sort of moment of analyzing a conversation or interaction, I try to put an end to it. I like let it pass and let it go. Because there's only so many ways you can like think of a situation, and I think before you let it affect you, and let it affect your confidence. And I've been there, and I feel like I still kind of bounce back and forth between, like, something happens, my confidence goes down, and then it goes up because I keep telling myself I'm bringing it. And I think that's always going to teeter back and forth. But I think the best thing I do is just, for the lack of a better word, is keep putting myself in these semi-uncomfortable situations or potential conversations, because I feel like it's something I want to do for my future, but also for the future of people like that would join the fire department. Because I'm not sure if they I don't know the history of the fire department, if they have ever had people of color. We were already like low on the female rank, but they're even lower on the people of color rank, or numbers rather. And I think that's what motivates me, and that's what brings me that confidence. I also do, yeah, I'll leave it there. If I'll add anything else, I'll let someone else speak. I want to keep rambling.
Yeah, there's a lot of like wonderful groups out there that like if you're afraid to start going into the great outdoors, yeah, like there are groups that can like kind of guide you through those. A great one is a group called She Moves Mountains. They're mostly based in like Oregon and California, but like they do a lot of like trips that you can sign up for if you want to start climbing. And they really, really like advocate in all of their trips. Like, this is for beginners. Like, you don't need to know anything. Just like, please come join us, like learn with us. And to me, like that was a very welcoming space that, it made me feel like, oh, I don't really need to know everything. I can go and learn there. So yeah, like looking for those kinds of groups that make you do feel welcome and teach you the basics.
And I go back to that sentiment of community. So however way you define community, reach out and try to go ahead and be with that group. For me, a big portion of that community is with Latino Outdoors. And the other sense, if there's a big cost and burden of transportation, there's other organizations that also offer a reduction of that transportation, or even free transportation to the outdoors. So sometimes it could just be doing a little bit more planning to be able to get outdoors if it's burdened by the cost of gear because you're a family or you're just low income and you want to go camping, and it's, you can go ahead and buy a $15, $20 tent or sleeping bag at Walmart, but realistically in some of those places, you may not necessarily have the best night's sleep, or you may not necessarily also feel safe, especially with rain showers and things like that. Reach out to some of the organizations, reach out to your community, and use your resources as best as you can. It does take time and energy, which you may not even have to begin with. But if you're interested in going the outdoors, it might be the best route for you to be able to navigate those spaces. The public library also have some great programmings, as well as a lot of the recreational centers around Denver that they can also connect you with some of the groups, and they also offer a lot of free trips and free gears and things like that.
I would say don't let people trick you into thinking that being outdoorsy means you have to go into the backcountry and fly fish at the top of a mountain. That is some of my personal brand of being outdoorsy, but not everybody got time for that. So I live in Thornton here, just north of Denver, and every 200 yards, there's like a tiny little open space, and there's grass and there's bugs and there's sticks. And I love poking at bugs with sticks. Still, I am 38. This is Crystal Egli. Keep forgetting to say it up top. I am so sorry. I love doing all that stuff still. And so I think it was in the book, How to Raise a Wild Child, that they talk about how when you're little, nature is right at your feet. You like jump in the puddle and there's worms in that puddle. And then as you get a little older, it's your neighborhood park or your backyard. And then as you get a little bit older, it's a little bit further away. And then finally, when you're a grown up, you think the only thing nature is the Grand Canyon, right? And so we need to remember as we get older and more experienced, or we start out, that maybe we all start out looking down, right down at our feet. And for me, I can't get to a mountaintop fly fishing spot every single day, although I wish I could. So I like to just be present and think what's right at my feet right now. So it's actually broadly applicable to everyone, no matter how quote unquote outdoorsy you are. Try to remember that nature is absolutely everywhere. And just like my business partner Parker always says, it's kind of same as being an environmentalist. We don't think that people who pick up cans to get the refund money are environmentalists, but you know, if I did it, I would be like posting it on my Instagram or something, you know, and being like, I am cleaning up the earth. There's all sorts of different things that count for being outdoorsy, that count for being environmentalist, that count for being responsible and for our ecosystem and the earth. And also count as playing in the outdoors, and it doesn't have to be at the top of Pikes Peak. Oh, you can drive that one, can't you? Yes, that's my thing. We'll drive a 14er. Do that. It's still outdoors.
I love that you mentioned that because someone, I'm sorry, this is Chris. Someone told me like, you are an outdoors person because you're constantly outdoors skating. And it never occurred to me because like skating is on pavement, but you're still outside, you're touching grass, you're getting sun, you're getting exercise, you're still outdoors. So I'm glad you said that. I think for me, I'm sorry if my cat's driving you nuts. She decides it's cuddle time, but I think what I want folks to know is that we belong and we deserve to be outside. I know that seems probably silly for me to say, considering I don't do it out of fear, but like when I do go out, I say that as a mantra to myself. So like I'm starting to like take these baby steps with my spouse. Like we went to Rocky Mountain Arsenal, which isn't like that far, but it felt like a huge step for me, you know? So going to Rocky Mountain Arsenal, and then when I pass people and I'm just not sure because they're giving me funny looks and I don't know how to deal with it, in my head, I say, I deserve to be here and I belong here. So I think there's a lot of like self-doubt talk that we inherit as like protection mechanisms from our ancestors, because it hasn't always been safe for us to be out. And so, you know, just trying to battle that thought that we're not safe or that we don't belong here. Just like try to get rid of that generational messaging and generational trauma, because although it may have been a protection mechanism for my ancestors, it's not serving me. So that's what I would say. I think we will win on that one. Does anyone have anything else to add to that one? Okay. So question number 6, with so many actionable items and creating inclusive spaces in the outdoors, what's one item someone can take immediately and participate in?
I can start us off. So as a fundraiser, my answer is like support financially the organizations that help to get people out in the outdoors. Like that is like one of the biggest supports you can give them is to just, you know, donate, yeah, support them, encourage them, follow them on social media, just help uplift them in any way that you can so they can continue to do the awesome work that they're doing.
Hey everyone, Robbin again. So with Yosemite National Park, Yosemite Valley, or Awani, meaning gaping mouth-like place, which was the ancestral lands of the Southern Sierra Miwok people. They're currently going through the federal acknowledgement land so that they can go ahead and receive those indigenous tribe rights for self-government. And as some of you may know, federal acknowledgement for these tribes, they're also able to go ahead and receive additional support, sovereignty and self-determination. Unfortunately, the process to gain federal acknowledgement is extremely challenging. The Southern Sierra Miwok Nation has actually been going through the process for about 40 years already, and they've been denied every single time. Most recently, right now, they're again in the process. So one thing that you can actually do right now is send in a letter of support for that indigenous tribe, petitioning for federal acknowledgement. Unfortunately, one of the ways that the federal government limits this is that you actually do have to send that physical letter. So get an envelope, get a stamp, and send that out there. You can go ahead and mail your letter to P.O. Box 186, Mariposa, California, zip code 95338. They recently just extended the deadline, which is, it's good, but it's not what we need. So the deadline to be able to submit it is on November 11th, 2022, so this year. And if you do end up sending it, definitely email the chairperson of the Southern Sierra Miwok Nation. That email address is ssmiwoknation@gmail.com. Just putting it out there. I can definitely connect and send that information out afterwards if you're interested, send you a template, but super easy. Just if you have a time to go ahead and get an envelope and a stamp, please, they definitely would benefit from you sending in their letter of recommendation.
Oh, Amber, you go ahead.
Yeah, real quick, just second what everyone says in terms of kind of getting involved in donating and making sure that you're attending these events. Educating yourself is important. I feel like I personally have to do that myself, and I think that a lot of the times people just see whatever on social media and think that that's the way they're supposed to act or whatever the case is, but they don't take that time to read an article or just be up to date. And then also understanding I guess this is what we're doing right now. We're understanding how we're actually feeling with different situations. But try to have a conversation with someone that has been affected by some situation or interaction with somebody else. And I think that's builds that empathy and really like that sort of education, understanding of what that person might be going through.
Can I say two? Okay, so first, a lot of affinity groups like Outdoor Afro are absolutely open to everyone. You don't have to be Black to go to Outdoor Afro. I'm only mentioning that one specific one because that's what I am absolutely 1000% certain. I've heard them say multiple times. So if you are not part of those groups or you don't hold those identities, shoot them a Facebook message, an Instagram message, and say like, hey, I don't identify as Black or I'm not Black, but is it appropriate if I show up? believe them if they say no and believe them if they say yes. Don't take the no personally. But there's a ton of groups. All you have to do is ask in advance. I just recommend that out of a courtesy. But so many of them will say yes. And just kind of flip that script on what it's like to not be in the majority for a minute. It's not going to be anything like the situation is for those of us who hold marginalized identities, but it's like a tiny little glimpse. So I encourage you to just like find a group of folks that are nothing like you and just ask if you can join them, and then go ahead. And it can be wonderful and amazing. And then the other thing I was going to say is a bit self-serving. The website that I run, Inclusive Guide, is literally we're mapping out safe spaces. It started with the outdoors and all of that, but to go into the outdoors, oftentimes you need to go to a grocery store or you need to go to a restaurant or all these things. So we didn't know where it ended. So it's also for everyone. Oh, thanks, Chris. It's also for everyone. And we just want to make sure that once we find safe spaces, other people can too. Word of mouth is how these things have spread historically. So, hey, should I go on the Pacific Crest Trail or the Appalachian Trail? Which one has safer stopovers? That kind of a thing. Like we've been talking about it. So we're just trying to get all the information kind of in one spot. So a little bit self-serving, but definitely do that.
Yeah, I think for me, an actionable thing you can do like right after this, like you don't even have to be outside, is like to demystify folks for you. Like I think there's this whole beautiful Twitter thread that I'm gonna totally mangle right now, but Sim Kern wrote about how like white folks are taught to be ashamed of their initial reaction or surprise about seeing BIPOC folks. And so when your initial reaction is shame, your first reaction will be to bury it. You know, you're not going to investigate it, which means you're never going to dismantle it. So I would suggest following people who are not like you on Twitter, not to ask them questions, not to hype in about anything, but just listen to what they have to say, hear about their experiences, demystify like who they are, and like a good mix of folks. Like if you've ever done, and I know some people have said this isn't a useful thing, but like, what is it called? The Harvard bias test or something. So like you can find out what you align with. Implicit bias test, yes. You can find out what you align with, or like what like experiences that you might not have favorable ideas about, or you might just be confused about. When I took it, I was surprised to learn that I always turn to the side of ability from disability, which I thought was kind of ironic considering I'm neurodivergent. So I was like, wow, I am against myself. But like when you find that out, then you can start following like disability activists on Twitter. You can dismantle like some of the ideas that you have. I think that a lot of the times we get this like feeling of, I don't want to be called out for my biases because I don't want to be a bad person, without realizing that because of the way our society is formed, everyone is biased. Like there's not a single person in this world who isn't biased, because we're brought up in a white, cisgender, heterosexual, able-bodied, Christian, supremacist nation. We internalize all of that, which means we have to like decolonize all of that as we grow up and we realize, hey, I've taken this in. It's impossible not to internalize it because we're swimming in it, right? So just knowing that there's no such thing as an unbiased person, and knowing that it's our responsibility to notice what our biases are, where our biases are, and then try to dismantle them. And part of it is demystifying people, like realizing that they're whole people, they're not just their identities, realizing like what they're saying about their experience and just all of that, because it's a continual forever. You will be doing this journey, and we're all hopefully doing it together. So instead of like feeling that guilt feeling and then burying it, like lean into it. Why did you have that reaction? Why do you feel the way that you do? Like investigate why that is, dismantle it, and then you'll be a better neighbor to folks in the outdoors or in the indoors. You know, you'll just be a better neighbor to other folks. So I guess that was like a lot of things, but like first thing, maybe take that Harvard implicit bias, or if you already know what your biases are, follow folks on Twitter and just listen to what they have to say. So next we're going to go through some of the questions that came up while people registered. And we're going to start with people who come from marginalized identity. So the first question that we had was, what advice can you provide for folks navigating workspaces with culturally incompetent leadership and colleagues?
That was difficult. So I'm also in tech. I'm a UX researcher. Currently, I'm in an amazing, oh, sorry, this is Amber. And currently, I'm in an amazing kind of startup environment. We're very holistic and maybe very welcoming. Not so much of some other tech companies that I've worked at before. And it's always been, you know, I'm like 5 or 6 years into the corporate, and I used to do documentary film work before, but corporate is obviously a very different environment, and it's been difficult. And I am trying to think of advice, because I think having open conversations, or trying to have one-on-one open conversations when things come up in the workplace is so important, like so important. You know, void from, you know, writing things out. And again, this is just my personal experience, you know, writing something out in an email or a Slack message or something did not work for me personally. I think it's always been a conversation that I've had to have, like a one-on-one conversation. And unfortunately, you know, those conversations are far and few between and not always welcome. And, you know, I could name a huge tech company that I've in Boulder that I did not feel comfortable. And I learned a lot in that company, but you know, there was so many moments that I felt like I wished I had a conversation around it, but I just kind of, you know, just absorbed you know, uncomfortable situations, or being called out for being, you know, like, you should go to like the Mexican rodeo. There's a Mexican day. You should go. And I'm like, you know, and I think maybe, I mean, I second that question. I actually am trying to think. I mean, like I said, I had one-on-one conversations and they worked. And I've also not have conversations. And I think I sort of semi-regret not having those conversations with those people. And I'll leave it there because I think I'm interested to hear what everyone else says.
I think my advice would be to, oh, sorry, this is Chris. My advice would be to find your accomplices, because chances are they do exist in your company. So like I was saying before, Megan is a huge accomplice for me. And of course, that's no shade on anyone else at my organization. Just like she's easy for me to like help me get things done the way that I feel that they should be done, to make space for me in my organization. So like for me, like finding Megan, having conversations with Megan, working with Megan to make proposals, because if the change isn't coming from leadership down, sometimes it has to go from the workers up, right? So getting together, making those proposals, pushing for some change, getting buy-in, like once we've come up with something, showing how it will benefit everyone if we increase the equity in this area. I know this is all like vague and like theoretical. I don't know how to use like a specific incident, but like, oh, I got one, have one. Okay, so, you know, Jedi training, right? So a lot of white-led environmental organizations didn't really think it was within their purview to do Jedi training. I should do the acronym. It's Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion is what I'm using. So Jedi. So like pushing for that training. So, you know, a lot of organizations after the murder of George Floyd decided that they needed to do something, but they didn't know what to do, or they didn't want to set aside time, or they didn't feel they had time to set aside, or didn't have money or whatever. So I worked with Megan to write a proposal for like a Jedi training, comprehensive Jedi training, and a audit of where our equity was kind of lacking. And so Meg and I wrote that, we brought it to the staff, and the staff were like, yeah, that makes total sense. And then they revised it, did little edits, and then we brought it to the board, and the board's like, yes, of course, that's what we want to do. So it just took like the push from the bottom going up to the top. So I would say, find your accomplices, write those proposals, get things moving, because I think the majority of the time in these white-led organizations, they do want to do the right thing, but they've never done it before. They don't know how to get started. And sometimes it will take the little fish at the bottom, the BIPOC folks, you know, putting in the effort and making those proposals and presenting something actionable. So that would be advice.
I have a little bit of spicy advice. I'm usually the most optimistic person in the room. It's like, just do this. I would say don't trust everybody that says they want to help. And I wish somebody said that to me many times over. Becky Mayers is on this call, and no, this is a good version. Becky, sorry, that sounded really bad. I'm like, don't trust anyone. So Becky, no, Becky's awesome. And one of the things she does is just continuously demonstrate action. There's a lot of folks who are like, Crystal, I see you like doing all this. How do I do this? And I'm like telling them the inside info, like all this stuff, like getting the word out, like do this. And then they don't actually do anything, but behind the scenes, they'll essentially rat out my work and undermine it, which is like really dangerous, honestly, and can impact my employment at the same time for rocking a boat, to which I say, I can rock boats because I can swim. But yeah, so rely on folks and confide in folks and work with folks who demonstrate actions and make sure actions line up with words. Just like Becky, who literally disappeared. Oh no, that wasn't Becky. I was like, Becky, I'm saying like really nice things about you. Don't go away off the Zoom. So find your Becky. Find your Becky.
Everyone, this is Robbin. I think for me, one of the first things is getting out of my own way. I am someone that has, although I may not project it every single time, but I've been someone that is constantly brought down by my own self-doubt, by my own imposter syndrome that I'm putting on myself. I've essentially created my own self-fulfilling prophecy at times. And so first and foremost is acknowledging that if change needs to happen, as everyone has been saying, there has to come, it has to come from someone. And if you are the one that really is most impacted, find your allies, find your community to really bring that forward. One of the other things that I'm also thinking of is, if you have the privilege, if you have the capacity, put your mental health first, because sometimes as much as you're willing to go ahead and fight the battle, it's going to burn you out. There's been an organization where I really strived and really tried moving forward. I believed in it. I was part of it for almost 8 years, but I was just burning myself out. And, like I mentioned, I had the privilege of being able to find another job that better aligned with my mission and vision as I am as a person. So I was able to make that transition. I think for me, the biggest and most important part is that no one's going to be in your corner except yourself at the end of the day. So you are your own self-advocate, and you're the only person that can really take care of yourself. So even when you're finding community, when you're finding allies, you are the person that knows your own limits. And I think that's super important. And there's so many people that I've known in these spaces that will continue and pushing, and they think that their limits are so far, and it really isn't. And I've seen them just get absolutely hurt, get absolutely demolished, unfortunately, in these spaces, that they just become, for lack of better words, a husk of themselves for the next few years. I'm also sometimes the person that, so especially here, as I said, I came from Miami, Florida. I'm also part Cuban. And so a lot of people, especially here in Colorado, the first thing that they tell me, like, oh, so Pitbull is a musical artist. He is known as Mr. Worldwide. He is Cuban and he's from Miami. And so people automatically assume and want to start a conversation with me about Pitbull. I do not like Pitbull. That is like, no. Great man. He does a lot of philanthropy, does a lot of good, but his music, his way of life for the most part does not resonate with me. And so when people have started to have those conversations with me, I've actually just stopped them. I've had the courage and I've had the opportunity to just tell them, hey, that's great that you like Pitbull, but it's not of interest for me. And, I find this a little bit offensive that you're actually the first thing that came to your mind when I told you that I identify as part Cuban, I'm from Miami, that Pitbull is it. And so it's usually taking people aback, but it's also chucked them in their own place. And it's making them acknowledge that, they think that they might have that one thing in common with you, but like they should really double check themselves before speaking out loud.
I do want to add one thing because I realized I was speaking to like make things better, but there is that point where you just have to give up on a space. Like I never want to do that because you always want to like make things better than when you got there and like make it more open for the next person in your shoes to come in. But sometimes that's just not possible. And like Robin said, you end up a husk of yourself. I've done that twice now where I just stayed and stayed. And I'm like, I'm going to make change. I'm going to make change. And then it changes me instead. So I attended this great, and I highly recommend it. It's through Art Equity. It's a workshop. It's through Art Equity. It's called BIPOC Surviving Predominantly White Institutions. And it changed my life. I took it twice because I needed to hear it twice because it was just so brilliant. But like the whole crux of it is like at some point, you have to really sit down with yourself and decide whether or not this space deserves your time. Like if you're talking about culturally incompetent leadership and colleagues to the point of abuse, like you need to get out. If you have any ability to get out, you need to get out. And if you don't have ability to get out, contact me. I will help you job search because we need to get you out of there, right? So yeah, I think at some point you have to decide whether or not a place is worth trying to fix. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes you need to leave. So I just want to throw that in there because I realized all my advice was like, fix it, but sometimes you shouldn't. Sometimes you need to leave. Okay, so the second question we had was how to access free programs. And I'm not exactly sure in what realm. So Mary, if you're in the call, do you want to come on mic and let us know what kind of free programs? Or you can also chat it if you like. Or if folks have like programs that you think might be helpful.
So for me, the only thing that really comes to mind with this question is, what free resources can you utilize to get you to the outdoors, get you those experiences? And, I think all of us have been mentioning some really great organizations that we're a part of that get you those free resources, get you that opportunity to get outdoors at either a reduced cost or just 100% free. I can go ahead and drop at least some of the organizations that I've been involved with, worked indirectly with, just to name a few. I've already talked about Latino Outdoors and Practicing Color, but I've had the opportunity to work with Outdoor Asian, Black Packers, Hispanics enjoying camping, hunting outdoors, Brown Girls Climb, as well as Environmental Learning Kids and Disabled Hikers. Those are some of the direct organizations that I've worked with. Definitely, I can drop them in the chat, and they all provide either some type of scholarship, in-kind items, and also just free opportunities to enjoy whatever you want to be able to, whatever you consider going to the outdoors or just experiencing some type of sport-related outdoor activity.
I unmuted to go, but realized I was still chewing. I don't know if anybody's noticed. I cannot stop eating. I am so hungry. So I'm glad you took that one, Robin. This is Crystal. One of the things I highly recommend folks doing is starting on social media if you have it. So if you and if you don't understand what I'm saying, go find your nearest 13-year-old and they will explain it to you. Go to hashtag Diversify Outdoors and start following a hashtag, not necessarily an account, and then a diversity of accounts will show up. That's a little Instagram hack there for y'all. All ya cool kids. So yeah, following a hashtag is a really great one, like a pretty broad one is pretty great way to start finding those. And then there's a lot of organizations. I went to a conference and there was somebody doing like a diversity breakout. You can always find me at a diversity breakout session at a conference. That's me in the front row. And the facilitator was talking about the scarcity mindset, like how could we possibly find enough diverse applicants, that type of thing. And so she ran everyone through this exercise where she had a column of kind of like identity categories. So it was like Black, LGBTQIA2S+, and women, things like that, right? And then in another column, it was like accountants, ski patrol, it was a ski thing, lawyers. And then the third column was like association of professionals and all these things. She was like, just pick a word from each column and Google that combination. And so we all picked different words. And sure enough, there's an association of Black ski patroller. Like there's just every combination of everything you could think of. So just think of an identity, think of some activity, and name an area, type it into Google. And it was just like this really cool exercise to like kind of disprove the scarcity mindset. But there's tons and tons and tons of groups out there, and especially over COVID, people have been really yearning for community, and it's right there. It's just fingertips away.
I want to call out that Allison shared a resource in the chat. So for folks on the phone who may not see it, it says, check out a state park pass and backpack at Colorado libraries. So it's at cpw.state.co.us CPW.state.library backpack. I'm going to say that slower. I realized I just like went through that real fast. CPW.state.co.us/library backpack. And something I want to drop in the chat is Colorado Gone Hiking group on Facebook. As Crystal said, social media, and I put it in my head. But this is like a group of folks that you just type in like, I want to go to this park or whatever, who wants to come with me? And that's how you can just instantly grab people who also want to hike with other folks. You can put like more specific things if you want. Like I'm planning, see, I sprained my ankle, but I didn't actually do it. But I'm planning on, since I'm all healed up, having like trying to get a trans only group so that we can also build community that way. Like, you know, try to get like a whole trans group, because there's almost 2,000 members in that group. And I know at least 2 of us, me and a friend, are trans. So I'm positive there are more. So that's one way I think to build community quite easily. You can choose your paths. They'll have like, this is an easy hike, this is a medium hike, and I'll only go on the easy ones because you don't need hiking shoes for those. You can just do your tennies. So I think that's a easy, cheap way to do stuff, a nice resource. So I'll throw that in the chat as well. So Brooke shared in the chat, there's a free training for a free gear library in the Westwood neighborhood coming up on August 22nd. So again, free training for a free gear library in the Westwood neighborhood on August 22nd. And Andrea wrote, Rocky Mountain National Park has backcountry sites solely designated for people with disabilities. Oh, and I missed Crystal mentioned Hunters of Color as well. And then Robin, sorry, I'm just reading all the comments. Robin mentioned exploring Rocky using an all-terrain wheelchair. So those are available. I think I got everything. Oh, yeah, okay. Josh has a solution. So I will download the chat before we get off this call, and then I'll email it to everyone who registered. It's smarter than trying to read them all. Thanks, Josh. So the next question is, how do you build a support system amongst all white co-workers who share nothing in common with?
I would say, first of all, you probably have something in common with them. There's got to be something, whether it's you eat tuna salad every day for lunch at the same time, or you both have a dog. There has got to be something. And Taisha Adams, I don't know, people know her. She's the first Black female commissioner for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and someone I look up to in many spaces, said she's quoting somebody famous who I actually forgot. So don't know who it was. But through this chain of coming out of her mouth was, change happens at the speed of relationships. Who actually said that? If you know, please type that in the chat. And so I just say small steps. This is obviously coming from a position of being an extrovert who loves people and grilling them with questions and being grilled in return. There's many people on this call who that is your worst nightmare, but maybe there's somebody else in your office who that's what you have in common. And you can also just sit in silence and enjoy that. But there's got to be something. it's a slow burn. This is not a sprint. It's a marathon. You're not going to both solve racism or oppression or any of the other isms by end of business day. So find out whatever it is, get to know people, and again, going back to like, make sure you see action, and action matching words before you establish that trust. But there's got to be someone. And there's got to be something. And even if it's just sitting alone quietly, both reading a book at the same time next to each other on your lunch break. Do people go have lunch breaks anymore in offices? Is that a thing people still do? I don't know. But yeah, there's got to be something. And so the initial conversation doesn't always have to be like, hi, Amber, I'm Crystal. So are you ready to tackle oppression in the office? In order for them to care, they're going to have to like actually know you. There's very few people in any office setting or anywhere in the world that that can just like immediately jump in to help without having some buy-in, some emotional buy-in for a reason. And so, yeah, getting to know people just on a base level, there's got to be something.
I tend to take the route of the social, emotional, psychosocial pathways, essentially. And so what I mean by that is there's a book that I essentially live by. I have the physical copy, I have the ebook, and I also have the audiobook. And I start off with that book, and it's called Getting to Yes, because it helps me check my own biases going into these conversations, because that book is all about getting into a mutual understanding, not just with colleagues, friends, but also your family members, things that you can actually utilize, tactics that you can utilize to make sure that you're not getting your way. They might not, they have their own way as well, and you're actually reaching an agreement in an amicable way. That may not always happen, but at the very least for me, it really helps me keep my biases in check and gives me the opportunity to have a more open mind going into these environments. The other aspect that I really mean by this is everyone has some sort of trauma that they're trying to overcome, whether they've realized it or not, and they may have internalized it. So there's a really great book that's called It's Not on Us, which pretty much talks about generational trauma and how it takes 3 generations essentially to break it. And so reading that book has also allowed me to have a better understanding on, what are those microaggressions coming from? What are those unknown triggers are coming from? And also understanding to be in a space with someone, you have to be willing and able to accept their triggers just as they're willing to accept your triggers. I think that's something really important. And I've definitely have at times disregarded that for the other person and have minimized their experience. And that's something that I am actively trying to work on. Another great book that has allowed me a lot of great insight for this is The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. And that's another great book dealing on trauma and how to actually be in that space with those individuals. So as Crystal was saying, finding that common ground, because there is something that you probably do have in common, whether it's a dog, something that you like to eat, or that you're working for the same organization. I'm more under the understanding that trauma brings in people together, and starting sharing those experiences, whether it's accepting their triggers, their traumas, and making sure that they're accepting yours can go a really long way.
This is Chris. So I kind of feel like you don't need to have anything in common with your coworkers in order to support each other. Like there's chances are you have something, but I'm an introvert, so I'd never know, So I think that, so speaking of, there was like this, I'm gonna go into story time. There was this ROTC guy when I was in college at Stevens Point, Wisconsin. And this was like right after 9/11. And I got arrested for political protest. and he was very offended by it. And he said some horrible things, and I said some horrible things in return. And then he said something that like changed how I look at folks in general. Like it stuck with me. I was 19 years old at the time. And he said, you know, if we both had the same experience, thoughts, and opinions, one of us would be redundant. And so like that really stuck with me. Like I don't have to see everything eye to eye. I don't have to share anything in common. I don't need those connections in order to support someone. I think it just comes from understanding where they're coming from, like investigating where someone's coming from. So if there's like, I don't know, a conflict maybe between you and a coworker, and you feel like the problem is that you don't share anything in common, maybe the thing you can share in common is a genuine care for each other, and ask them, you know, why it is that they feel so strongly about this thing. I don't know what it is, but this thing that they're bringing up, and see if you can see it from their point of view, maybe talk about your point of view. But there's like, I don't think we need to have anything in common with each other in order to see each other as fully realized human beings that have a story, that have trauma, like Robbin said, that have aspirations that we just need to express in order to be able to support. So that's my thought. Okay. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next question? So from the chat, we had a question, curious to hear from the panel, any successes you have had in encouraging individuals and organizations to not always focus on nature being out there. I don't see anyone jumping on this one. Is it like something folks haven't experienced?
I just wanted to give other folks a chance. I have a lot of thoughts, but I've been talking a lot, so I wanted to give other folks a chance if they wanted it. Anybody, or should I just start talking? Oops, just stopped a bunch of stuff. So go. Well, I think it begins with yourself first. If you want to try to convince people of something, you have to have your own buy-in first. So I've always kind of been that slow walker who literally stops and smells the roses, much to others' chagrin. I try to invite curiosity around me. Even when I'm with a bunch of people, I'll be like, look at that cool leaf. You know, I've got a daughter, and if I see like one of those, there's like a crab apple tree near where we live, she always wants to like take a bite out of it, and they're super nasty, but I tell her they give them, each different one gives her a different superpower. So some days she eats one and it makes her invisible for 2 minutes and I can't see her. Another time she'll eat it, it makes her super loud. Sometimes I can't hear her no matter what she says. And it is actually strategic based on my own mood and where I'm at as a parent. But yeah, so now she thinks we have a magical apple tree, and she stops and looks at the tree every single day, whether I have the time or not. And so little things like that, like just inviting curiosity and imagination as a kid, for kids or as a grown-up. I don't believe that you can be too old to have fun, like with like building a little fairy house in the forest. That is my absolute favorite thing to do. So even by myself. Anyway, so just it has to start with yourself first, is my point. Otherwise there's going to be absolutely no way you can invite others to poke at things in a stream with a stick. And then once you do, don't be ashamed of just having fun and playing in nature, like playing. And whatever that looks like for you, just other people are more reluctant to it. That's why we don't all do it. So when somebody's like, oh my gosh, you're gonna get dirty, like you gotta wash off your jeans, I'm sure. So yeah, just don't let people stop you or tell you that you need to get out of that puddle or anything. Your shoes will dry, I promise.
So before we get too close to end of time, I want to invite all of our panelists to drop their like tip websites, like Venmo, PayPal, Ko-Fi, whatever you have, into the chat. And if folks could tip them for their time, that would be wonderful. Does anyone else have an answer to this question? Okay, I think we got through all the questions with asterisks. But if anyone else who readily identifies as someone from a marginalized community has any additional questions, please feel free to come off mute or chat your question now. Hi, Andy. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on to the other questions. So we had the question, are there particular sports or activities that you feel present as less welcoming or inclusive in Colorado?
Anybody else? I feel like I'm just like answering all the questions, but no joke, I play hockey. So yeah, I'll just speak briefly. Crystal here. I play hockey and it's mostly white men, very specifically, who play hockey, shocking absolutely no one. But I am up to 12 people on a spreadsheet who every time I see a hockey player of color at my rink, I literally run up to them and make them fill out my Google spreadsheet on my phone. And we're going to have an all BIPOC hockey team very soon. And we're going to be called the Black Panthers. But I actually have I've experienced one bad racial thing in hockey in a year that I've been, or a year and a half that I've been playing here. And it was very subtle and no one else around me got it. But that was it. And then I scored on that person 5 months later. So
I could speak to sports that I think are inclusive. So I would say that roller derby in Denver specifically is pretty inclusive. It does vary from team to team, so you gotta choose the right team. But the team that I'm on right now is super trans affirming. There's like BIPOC representation. It's great. The one issue is, of course, upfront cost, but they also try to help folks out with like a free bin of stuff, of gear. So I think that's my favorite sport I've done so far as far as inclusivity. It's not that it's without any issues, there's still some issues, but you know, that's everywhere. So good sport.
So for me, I love playing basketball. By all accounts, I am not good at basketball. I am a relatively short person compared to someone that actively plays basketball. But all that to say is I've never not had the opportunity to walk into a court and not be picked. Everyone has always been picked. So that's always been really nice. And something that I find just absolutely refreshing and lovely is that, we've been playing full court games. We're really going at it. And if there's a little kid that comes on by and just asks, hey, can I shoot the basketball? Everyone will not hesitate and will stop and give that basketball to the kid. Just so that they can shoot around 2 or 3 times, sometimes even helping them make that shot. So that's also really nice. And when I'm playing by myself, I'm just shooting around. It's always been a great conversation starter for me, because people of all walks of life will always come up and say like, hey, can I just shoot 1 or 2 times? And oftentimes that's enough to start a conversation and getting to know someone. And I find it relaxing, and I find it very welcoming.
I'm gonna jump in. I don't really play sports, so the first thing I thought of was hiking. That's it. But and the fire department. That's all I found. So yeah, I play basketball in Chicago, but not so much in Colorado.
So we're at time. If any of our panelists need to leave, do feel free. But does anyone on the call have any other questions they want to ask? And also, thank you to all our panelists if you do have to leave. I really appreciate your time and expertise. Bye, Crystal. Do you have any questions from folks still on the call? Okay, well, thank you all for joining us, and big thank you to our panelists, and don't forget to tip them and have a good rest of your night. Bye, everyone.